everyone. I hope you are doing well. This evening, as we continue in our study of the tabernacle, we are going to be looking at the altar of incense. And so because of that, if you have your copy of God's Word, I would encourage you to make your way over to the book of Exodus chapter 30. Exodus chapter 30, we're going to be focusing in on verses 1 through 10. This evening, and as you're making your way there on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and get it popped up there. Of course, our view of the tabernacle, as we're thinking about the altar of incense, we are looking at number 4 there inside the holy of inside the holy place, or the tent of in the tent there. In terms of number 4, you see the little kind of golden box there right before you get into the Holy of Holies. That is where we are going to be looking this evening, is at number 4. That is the altar of incense. So hopefully you've made your way over to chapter 30 there, verses 1 through 10. Think about it like this. As we begin to walk through, I want to read verses 1 through 10 there, and then just make some observations, and then I've got a couple of other things that I want us to look at and kind of think through as it relates to what exactly the altar of incense is. And so as we start off in verse 1 there of chapter 30, it says, "You shall make an altar to burn incense on. You shall make it of acacia wood. A cubit shall be its length, and a cubit its width, and it shall be square, and 2 cubits shall be its height. Its horn shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay its top, its sides all around, and its horns with pure gold. And you shall make for it a molding of gold all around. 2 gold rings you shall make for it under the molding on both its sides. You shall place them on its 2 sides, and they will be holders for the poles with the which to bear it. You shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold also. And you shall put it before the veil that is before the ark of the testimony, before the mercy seat that is over the testimony, where I will meet with you. Aaron shall burn it in sweet incense every morning, and when he tends the lamps, he shall burn incense on it. And when Aaron lights the lamps at twilight, he shall burn incense on it, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. You shall not offer strange incense on it, or a burnt offering, or a grain offering, nor shall you pour a drink offering on it. And Aaron shall make atonement upon its horns once a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonement. Once a year he shall make atonement upon it throughout your generations. It is most holy to the Lord." So let's stop and kind of, just kind of begin to gradually work through just the basics of it. In verse 1 there and 2, we learn its top is a square, so 1 cubit, 18 inches by 18 inches by the 36. We learn in verse 3 there, it is going to be overlaid with gold, but as well, it is going to have the horns on it that we are reading about here. Verse 4 begins to talk about the poles that are going to be used to be able to transport it. But look at verse 6, it says, "And you shall put it before the veil that is before the ark of the testimony." That is, if you're looking on the picture there that normally pops up, in between the Holy of Holies and where the altar of incense is, that's the veil that is talking about, is in between the Holy of Holies and where that altar is actually going to sit, is what verse 6 is talking about here. Look in verse 7, it says, "And Aaron shall burn on it sweet incense every morning when he tends the lamps. He shall burn incense on it." So there's going to be this sweet incense that is burned every morning because of this altar. In verse 8 we learn he shall burn incense on it. It is a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. And so there again, it's perpetual. It is something that is going to be constant. It is going to be ongoing. We'll see a little bit more of why that is here in just a second. But there again, just to kind of give us an overview of it, in verse 10 we also learn it's going to make the high priest Aaron and such will make atonement once a year as a sin offering before the Lord. Whenever we think about verse 6 there, it says, "Before the mercy seat that is over the testimony, where I will meet with you." And so thinking about all of these things, it really begins to stir up this side of, okay, what is God asking of the people? What is He calling them to do? What is the plan? What is the purpose? Okay, so real quickly, I want to draw our attention over to actually chapter 30 there, same chapter. But I want us to go over to verses 34 through 38, because here's kind of the other side of where the incense is coming from, and kind of give some of the boundaries and potentials for what we're thinking through. So real quickly, in verse 34 through 38, it says, "And the Lord said to Moses, take sweet spices, stack," and I'm going to pronounce these as best as I can, "stack and acacia and galbanum and pure frankincense. With these sweet spices there shall be equal amounts of each. You shall make of these incense a compound according to the art of the perfumer, salted, pure, and holy. And you shall beat some of it very fine, and put some of it before the testimony in the tabernacle of meeting, where I will meet with you, and it shall be most holy to you." Notice the end of verse 36 there. But it says in verse 37, "But as for the incense which you shall make, you shall not make any for yourselves according to its composition. It shall be to you holy for the Lord. Whoever makes any like it to smell it, he shall be cut off from his people." So let's kind of walk through verses 34 through 38 as it kind of pops up on your screen there. That first one, statch, I'm assuming is how you say it or whatever. It's more like a gum resin. And so think of it kind of in terms of that side of it, the anica. Maybe it's like a clamshell, but whenever it's burned, like you scratch the side of it and you get the incense off of that, basically, that whatever the coating comes off, it's that odor that begins to be emitted from it, and is a very strong odor. The galbanum is a Mediterranean coastal plant, and it's basically, think of it like this, it's used to act as a prolongment kind of source. It's something that it doesn't burn quickly. It's something that is slow burning. And so think about it from that side of it as it's not just going to be incense that lasts 2 minutes. It's going to have a prolonged effect to it. And then, of course, frankincense, it smells good, and it comes from a boswellia tree. And so kind of going through these things, you see these different these different spices beginning to come together in order to make it clear that all of them mixed together is going to have some kind of effect. It is going to produce some kind of aroma that is towards God. And so thinking about the incense there, we learn in verses 34 and 35, there's not really any kind of so to speak, measurements that are given. It's something that they're going to begin to figure out as it talks about there. That's compounded together. It's going to be just kind of as they go along, they'll put the measurements together, and then from there it'll be a point of consistency. And so we learn, at least through Aaron, that he's offering it in the morning time, twilight, and different points, but still there's got to be a point of consistency and kind of that routine as to how the incense is burned. But nevertheless, thinking about verses like at the end of verse 36 there, what does it say? It shall be most holy to you. There again, if you look in verse 37, it shall be to you holy for the Lord. So thinking about what is going on here, this incense, it begins to represent something. It begins to say, okay, it's not just baseline. There's another deeper thought and a deeper level that goes into it. And so thinking along those lines, consider what is happening and what is being said. And, to you it is holy, to the Lord it is holy. But then in verse 38, we learn if anybody makes it and he like it, to smell it, he shall be cut off from his people. That's more or less, as it pops up in your notes there, it's like a death penalty if it's mimicked. It carries a very strict connotation that it's directly used for God and not for anything else, not even for personal use. If you were to make this concoction up to be able to use for your own personal, smells around your home, so to speak, you would be banished. You would be, kicked out of your people. So there is obviously a very strict understanding as to what this incense looks like and what it is used for. So let's go and let's think through there again, kind of chapter 30 verses 1 through 10 a little bit on a different side. We learn in Leviticus chapter 16 verse 12, it explains that the wood for the altar of incense came from the altar of burnt offering, that is the altar of burnt offering out in the courtyard. So they would get the wood from there and they would bring it in for the altar of incense, that is into the holy place there. As we learn in verse 6 there, it is used in terms of the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur as we know it, or maybe you've heard of that statement. And so as we start to think about the mercy seat, there again, I don't want to keep kind of pushing it off, but I want to kind of pull all that together whenever we actually get to the Ark of the Covenant itself. But still, you start thinking about what exactly this is used for, and think about it like this. Incense is commonly used as a prayer before God. In Psalm 141 verse 2, you see David using this idea of incense and this association of prayer. In Revelation chapter 5 verse 8, you see that, it is the prayers of the saints as it relates to this altar of incense. You think about all these different ways, and this altar of incense is to be used as a way of commonality of saying, God, this is our prayers for you. Notice even as you think about, as we walk through verses 1 through 10, what was the purpose in verses 8, 9, and 10? It's generational. It is something that is going to be going from generation to generation to generation. And so this altar of incense, to be able to make it before the Lord, and its offering of prayer, basically, there's a generational side of this that is saying it's not just a few minutes here or there, but every generation is going to be offering prayers before God. I mean, that's powerful. Stop and think about how we are walking through those moments right now. Not just for a second, but what our overarching eternal prayer life looks like. In that last slide that pops up, there's, a couple of different things that I want us to think about, and prayer being one of them. But before we get to that, just think about it. If incense was holy to God, how are we representing holiness right now? How are you holy because God is holy? We know that we have become the righteousness of God according to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. If we've become the righteousness of God, and we are, so to speak, instilling or having these holy acts within our lives, I can't help but to wonder and kind of ask that. How are we displaying the holiness of God each and every single day in our lives? And we are representing Him with our lives, with our hearts, with our mouth, with our ears, our eyes, everything. How are we being holy? But there again, going back to that point of prayer, it's a reflection of incense. What are your prayers accomplishing right now? Are your prayers self-conceited? Are they, internally satisfied, so to speak? Are you praying for others? Are you praying for God's will to be done? How pointed is your prayer life? What if your prayers were to be answered? Would anybody else's life be affected by it? Would it be just your life? Would others be able to reap the benefit of your prayers, so to speak? Whenever you stop to think about who you are praying to, you're not just praying to anybody, you're praying to God. You're praying to the one who is the author and the finisher of our faith. You're praying to the one who is and is to come. Everlasting, eternal. In Daniel, he is known as the Ancient of Days. I love that statement, but still, whenever you think about who you are lifting your prayers to, you're praying to the one who is able to make anything happen. One that makes all things possible. That's not something to take lightly. That's not something to just kind of carry on your back and say, okay, and do whatever with as flippantly as you want. No, there ought to be a very deep source of conviction that relates to our prayers. And here, we're learning that they're setting it up to be generationally. How are you teaching your kids how to pray? How are you teaching your family to pray? Do you even pray together as a family? Somewhat, and sometimes we can mimic things, but still, how are we taking care of that general concept of prayer within our lives? What do we need to do better by? How do we need to refocus it? How do we need to fine-tune it, so to speak, in the long run? This point of incense is, there again, a representation of constant communication with God. Can I ask you, are you making that same point of communication to where it's constant, it's ever-flowing? You're able to, as Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5, pray without ceasing. Do you have that constant, source of, communication with God in your day-to-day walk? If you don't, I would encourage you. It is definitely something you need to have. It's something you want to have. You should desire to have. But it's something that I would say should be openly fulfilled. People should be able to see what it means that whenever you pray, something's going to come. There's something that comes as a result of it. That it's not just taken lightly. But nevertheless, I hope this challenges you, and I hope it encourages you to stop and kind of consider this altar of incense and how it was communicated then, what it means for us today, and ultimately how we can apply it to our lives. But nevertheless, I hope you have a blessed and wonderful rest of your Wednesday. If you need anything, please let me know. If you have any questions or comments or anything else, please feel free to reach out to me. But otherwise, I guess from there we'll wrap up this video, and we'll continue on next week, I believe, as we head into the Holy of Holies. And so we'll get into that next week. But love y'all, appreciate you, and I guess we'll talk to y'all later.